All right, we're in the pregame, which means that we're going to start in a couple of minutes. If you join early, there's two viewers. Hey, Taz, how are you? Or Taz, sorry. Aloha. Taz, what's the lag at the moment? It's usually about 2 minutes. We'll see. All right, let me see if I can get this thing to share my. I make fun of people who have like 6 screens. No, I envy them. This is hard. Okay, so you should see a slide that says what hiring managers actually see and a talking head, that being mine. And if you could, let's wait. Let's give it another. Let's give it like, see, 10 current. We had 240 something register. So we'll give it a couple of minutes. But I think a lot of people wanted to register just to get the replay, and that's fine. Right? We're all busy. Most of us are either have jobs or are we. No, you're not. Wow, you had 2 gig fiber. That's awesome. And you're in Florida. Florida's pretty well wired these days. Yeah, I'm on 100 meg fiber, if you can believe it. And we're the first people to get that wire in my neighborhood. I have neighbors 2 doors down that work for SpaceX, and they dug a trench and ran their own fiber. I have no idea how they pulled that one off. I would love to know. But we're about to move back closer to town. We're kind of on the outskirts of Oaxaca de Juarez in a place called Guayapam, and it's been great. And it has a pool for my daughter, but it's kind of remote, and internet's pretty bad here. My fallback for my local internet, my fiber, is DSL, which is horrendous. We've occasionally done events where I had to run a cable into the house to pick up the copper, and it was barely usable. So before we moved here, we lived in a part of town called San Felipe del Agua, which is like rich part of town. I had brand new fiber to the neighborhood, and I got better bandwidth and reliability in that place than I had in Brooklyn, like by a factor of 3. So we're moving to a neighborhood with better telmex and decent cell service, so won't be an issue anymore. Let's see, Curtis, welcome. Good to see you. Thanks for heads up on my spam bot. Most, if not all of you, will have gotten spam from me over the past week. There's a series of experiments on direct response, email marketing, and a lot of like A/B testing. So thanks for not unsubscribing. I'm going to take it down to 1 a week because I figured I learned what I needed to learn from the results. Went to Oaxaca to play tennis 10 years ago. My daughter plays tennis a couple times a week. It's good tennis now. There's a lot of paddle here. Like paddle and pickleball are a big deal in Oaxaca. All right. Well, while we are gathering, uh, request if you could drop your. Well, we see your names. Drop your role and the size of your team, and if you are either looking for a job or looking to hire. Like, let's use this for networking, and if you want people to reach out to you, say so. As a rule, I figure if you're in an event with somebody, it's fair game to reach out. So, but you might want to be explicit about it. Some people are a little too polite. Taryn, good to see you. Bay Area, right on. 22 on. Okay, yeah. So there's that. So let us know if you're looking for work or you're looking for people. The other thing is there's going to be some slides, and I'm going to do a little bit of an overview of the problem, because I think if we understand any given problem, the solution becomes easier to understand, not necessarily to pull off, but it does become possible, especially in a situation where we're in this kind of and not deal with the cybersecurity labor market, which I talk about a lot. I'm going to talk about today about just one of the basics, which is resumes. So if anybody would like, Fong from Malaysia, awesome. There is Starlink here, Carl. It sucks because it's cloudy a lot. Yeah, my neighbor and the people who work for SpaceX in my neighborhood probably have as a backup. I know people who work in IT who are in video conferencing all the time, and all too often they're like, "Yep, I had to like stop working because it got cloudy." Whatever. We're also on a part of the. I think we're on a part of the globe that doesn't have as many satellites. I don't know what. I mean, this is pure speculation, but I think that's what's going on. So yeah, Starlink is not great, and Hughes satellite is a joke. After I canceled it, they didn't even come up. They didn't come to pick up the antenna. They just like left it because nobody wants Hughes. Cool, Israel. Thanks for commenting that. And Israel, where are you in the world? Taz, you're in San Antonio. Sorry about that. I keep thinking you're in Tampa. Yeah, San Antonio. Marketing, awesome. Give me 6 months, and I might hit you up for help, Taryn. So y'all know I'm Peter Schawacker. I'm CEO and co-founder of 1.5 companies. One is Nearshore Cyber, and that is a staff and recruiting company that concentrates on mostly nearshore with Mexico, other parts of Latin America. I did a presentation on that topic last week. You can get the replay on. You can get it on LinkedIn, but it's not edited, and it has a lot of ums and ahs and pauses and screw ups. There's an edited version that's quicker, crisper, better on YouTube. So search for Nearshore Cyber and you'll find that. There is a Project Aramis page. I'm doing this under the Project Aramis brand. That is the other company that I'm starting up, have started up. We have actually released, but it's not yet. We're kind of incubating it under Nearshore Cyber. So the way the companies work, Nearshore Cyber does staff and recruiting outside the United States, but not generally in the United States. I'll do it for friends every now and then on a special basis, but for the most part, we're trying to make the boundary between Nearshore Cyber and Project Aramis geographic. So if you're outside the US, I'm recruiting you. If you're in the US, I want you to use Aramis. Aramis is a platform for doing some of the stuff I'm going to demo today, right? But there's like an ethical problem that shows up if I try and work the same geography, the same sort of cohort with both things, and it becomes like, are you doing pay to play? I want to avoid all that stuff, and so we're like pretty explicit. If you're in the U.S., do Aramis. I'm about to start working on building up a channel so recruiters I can sort of send candidates to and just somehow make money in the back end. But I want to keep the ethical boundary clean and transparent. So that's, some people have been like, is this pay to play? No, it's not pay to play. It is pay though. But I'm going to show you stuff that you can do for free that we charge for, because I think one of the things that we're trying to do is create a complete change in the cyber labor market. Basically, we're trying to create a new one. I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I will keep talking about how the way that people look for work, are evaluated for jobs, the way people hire, it's all broken, and it's really nobody's fault. I get really tired of the complaints and the vitriol about, one particular party being the problem. I've been and am on all sides. So for about 28 years before I started this, I think it's 28, I think it's going on 30 to now, I was a practitioner and I was a manager and I ran P&L for a couple of companies. I've been a CISO 1.5 times. The halftime was after an acquisition of the first one. And I still do some fractional every now and then by request. I don't seek it out, but I've done that. I'm a practitioner. I spent most of my career as an engineering consultant doing pre-sales, post-sales. First job, SecOps, right? So the job that a lot of people want, I've had, and I've managed teams to do it. So I've been a job seeker. I have been a hiring manager. And these days I'm a recruiter and apparently the owner and head of everything for Project Aramis, which is my first software startup. And we can talk about that a little bit here. If anybody has any questions about it, drop it into the chat. Yeah, Evan, this is right up your alley. Hopefully you'll be able to take something from this that you can use. And by the way, I also designed it to not require the kind of horsepower that we use. Much of what Aramis consists of is mapping between the NIST NICE framework and job roles as they're commonly defined. But there's everything I'm going to show you can do on your own. So let's see. Yeah, well, let's get into it. Welcome, Abnui. Hopefully I got your name pronounced right. From Malaysia. By the way, in terms of where nearshore recruits, it's first Mexico. Philippines is our second choice because we've focused there, and we have about 1,200 people that we track in the Philippines. The request of a friend, we picked up Singapore and Malaysia recruiting, and we've made a lot of friends in that neck of the woods. A little bit of Mumbai. I generally avoid India just because it is so big. It's like 15 countries, and geographic focus matters when it comes to like trying to scale this thing. So we stick to certain geographies. Mad love for India. It's big. So let's get into it. Well, if you have to bounce, it'll be your report. Now, this is something I see all the time. I mean, I've seen since I started Nearshore Cyber 4 years ago. I think it's about 4 years. I probably read a couple of thousand resumes. I have read 2-3 times that number of LinkedIn profiles. And I've counseled a lot of people. One of the things that I didn't know when I got into this was that tech recruiters don't do tech interviews. I just assumed that they did and did so, with uneven quality. Nobody told me until about a year and a half ago that they don't do that. They do pre-screening, and then maybe they'll check their network, and then they'll pass candidates off to the client. And you can go fast like that. Like you can get a request and turn it around in like an hour if you're good. I do tech interviews, and I vet people pretty rigorously on a tech basis and also on a kind of like social likability, social skills basis. One of the things I look at is the resume well written and plausible? And my clients really like it, but it makes it slow. So one of the reasons I created Aramis, actually the original reason I created Aramis was just as an automation platform for us. I needed to be able to go fast. It takes me about an hour to put a CV together using the techniques I'm going to show. And I could also make a branded resume and all that stuff. But I had a client come to me and ask if I could conduct what's called a human capital assessment of his team of about 12.5 security people around the world. That is in progress. But I created the automation to make that work, and I realized I really should just turn this into a product. I don't want to do this in spreadsheets anymore. My ATS, every ATS is pretty much garbage. They may look nice sometimes, but they're not nearly as smart as people like to think they are. They're basically just CRMs for recruiters, internal and external recruiters. There's very little AI in them, and any attempt to apply artificial intelligence to resumes and job descriptions as they are written fails almost every time. You know, one of the things I've noticed, increasingly so, is things like this, like lead and incident response across a 10,000 endpoint enterprise. Now, that can go one of two ways. On the one hand, it might mean that, they actually managed containment across dozens of incidents, made real decisions under pressure. Like they ran the room or were playing a key part in instant response, and they did it, scores of times. But then most cases, it's, the candidate was in the room or maybe in the next room. And so it's impossible to tell from a statement like the one you see here as to whether somebody's actually done the work. My interviews usually take an hour, sometimes two. They used to take longer. One of the reasons is I find myself spending at least 15, 20 minutes doing career counseling. I figure, out of every, 50 people I interview, one's going to get the job and the other 49 are going to wind up disappointed. So I try and provide some kind of value in the form of coaching in return. That is one of the things that I built into Aramis in a phase called Reconcile. I'm not going to get into it today, but I realized after a few years of 18-hour days interviewing people around the world 7 days a week, that was simply unsustainable if I wanted to avoid a stroke. So that's something I built into Aramis. I still do the tech interviews though. They're important. So some of you are going to look at these numbers and go, these are bullshit. They are. And that's what I want to talk about. But there's something to be said for these. I think the Kaspersky report, this is from, about a year and a half, 2 years ago. It's not terribly out of date. It says that 52% of employers said that certs don't match skills. There's two reasons for that. One is that they weren't really intended to. Certifications are intended to sell more certifications. Now, vendor certs are different. What I see is that the generic certs are, and those are in the majority, things like the CISSP and the Security Plus and the CISM and some degree of CISA from the ISACA they're about the basics. They're about, do you know the fundamentals? Do you know the concepts that you can import to various contexts? But they don't get into like, is there evidence of you having done the work? You can do a lot of reading and get it. Now, the certification business field started in an era where you would do the job and then you would do the certification. The CISSP has a 5-year minimum experience requirement that somebody has to sign off on. Somebody who already has a CISSP has to sign off because you're supposed to have done the work before you take the test. But as we all know, like if you look at the requirement, you don't really have to have security experience to take the exam. I studied for it for about 9 months in 2002. We taught it. We did a free CISSP study group in parallel between English and Spanish. We'd alternate weeks. And I found it really hasn't changed all that much. I still think it's valuable. What I object to is the belief that the CISSP will get you a job. Now, it's a filter, and if you don't have it and you've been at this for 5, 10 years, I might question, like, why have you not bothered? But I can usually figure out pretty quickly, like, if you know your stuff anyway. It's not that much of an aid. Now, there are more generic certifications that are useful. I like the OSCP a lot because you have to write a deliverable. I like the similar offensive security training that TCM does. Same reason. And in their case, you have to present that deliverable. So those are good. Vendor certifications, better, right? In some cases, you have to have some practical knowledge. Like, I got certified at Netscope. I had to actually use Netscope in a lab to make it work. Because I hadn't used it in production, I really struggled. And there's a point where you just have to use these things in the real world. It is a bit of chicken and the egg, but that's life. Like, that's how work is. Experience comes from doing it on the job and being in a situation where if you get it wrong, people get mad, people lose money, people get hurt, people lose their jobs, right? And that's where the experience comes from. It's in the stakes and the risk and the anxiety and the wondering, like, am I going to miss the alert? Not, because of an exam, but because you lose your job, or more likely, you're just going to have people yelling at you, which isn't fun either. So a lot of us find that the certs don't match the actual work. 49% cite lack of practical experience as their top hiring challenge. Right? There's a kind of consolidation in the job market where the people who have experience get more experience and the people who don't. Now, practical experience need not happen on the job. And one of the things that we built into Aramis is a learning and development roadmap, which as an option can suggest projects. I would suggest you do them with friends. More importantly, or even better, build stuff that you can put on the internet and defend it. I've learned more from Project Aramis and securing that system and making it work and dealing with all the fiddly stuff that no one tells you about in any book than I did and I started 6 months ago. We released 2 weeks or about 2 weeks ago tomorrow is when we ended the beta period. I learned more in that 6-month period than I did in 30 years in IT. Before cyber, I did other IT work. So you'll learn a lot by building something that is somewhat complex, giving away to your friends. Like, you don't have to sell it. I think you should try, right? To learn some stuff about sales and marketing. But more importantly, having something on the internet that people attack will toughen you up. Now, the 3.5 million number from Cybersecurity Ventures, which if you look for it, it was a sponsored paper by an MSSP. It's actually a really good MDR provider. I think they're probably on the level, but you always have to read the paper. Don't form an opinion just on the number. What's the number? Well, for one thing, this is not the ISC squared number, which they stopped publishing because they got so much flack for it. If you're interested in that controversy, Ben Rothke wrote a really excellent paper. I think it's on Medium, and he lets loose on it. And I think rightfully so. ISC squared decided to not publish that anymore, even though it actually got them a lot of attention for their benefit. So to their credit, they stopped using it. The 3.5 million number is global. There are 8 billion people on the planet. How many people do IT? How many of those IT jobs have security in them? From time to time, actually a lot. Cloud engineers, cloud people reach out to me and say, I want to get into security. I'm like, well, what do you do in your cloud job? Cloud engineering. Is it not identity access management most of the time? And it turns out it is. Like, most IT has a big chunk of security in it. And so it's hard to pin down the categories. Now, the NIST NICE was, I think, and I haven't talked to those guys, by the way. So if you work for NIST NICE, like, reach out. Like, we should hang out. I'm a fan. I built a business on your stuff. The the reality is that security isn't one or two jobs like it used to be. When I started, it was network security, and it was host-based security and incident response, which wasn't really even nominally a thing. You just did it. And that's kind of it. That's what it was about. And most security was network security because networking was on the rise and you could get money for that. If you're doing endpoint security, nobody wanted to fund you because I was one of my clients, like 2001, 2002, said that the rest of the business referred to IT as the typewriter department. It might have been City, actually. That's where it was first. typewriter department, and security was the typewriter security department. So it was considered a joke. And that's how endpoint security, things like antivirus were perceived. So you were probably in network security, but the field expanded and differentiated. So like the idea of being a GRC specialist used to just be under IT audit. The idea of the distinction between red teaming and pen testing and application security used to be there was no distinction. Now those have specialized, and that's good. But some of them have like a lot of identity actually lives under IT, and I think that's probably the right place for it most of the time. And so we're going to continue to see confusion over like what is cybersecurity, where does it live, where does it report. Like I said at the beginning, I've been a CISO. When the question of like who should the CISO report to comes up, I'm like, I don't know, like who has the resources and who can you work with? If the CIO has all the TOGAF things, things like business analysts and enterprise architects and all that stuff, financial analysts, and the CISO doesn't, because the organization isn't big enough, report to the CIO. If the CEO wants you to report to them, cool, right? As long as you're adequately supported, it doesn't matter where you are. And that's the point. Like cybersecurity has been transformed through the realities of the increasing complexity of IT in business. Security does not actually change that much. The context changes like crazy. So like I said earlier, we're in this Gordian knot situation where the system doesn't really work for anyone, but for a few parties. One is LinkedIn. The job boards actually make more money if you don't get the job than if you do. If you're a hiring manager, you might have noticed that it takes a long time to sift through resumes. The ATS vendors, I think, if in a quiet moment, will tell you that they make more money when they don't place people. If you work for an ATS vendor, I'm sorry, like be better. Recruiters, whose job it is to get you work, by the way, they don't get paid more if they don't get back to you. They don't get paid more if they ghost you. Ghosting happens. I am often slow to get back to people. Like I'll respond if you reach out to me, but I won't be proactive. I don't have time, right? But it is in my interest to get you placed. And if it takes a long time, it's almost always because there's something on the client side, and it's not usually the hiring manager's fault, right? But there is fault everywhere, and one area where things are screwy is resumes, and not just from the job seeker's perspective. So, you write a resume, it goes through some basic pattern matching. Again, AI is not really doing this. If you were to see the kinds of results that come out of AI-based candidate selection, you'd be appalled at how bad it is. It is so bad that people don't really use it. I've tried a lot of them. Part of the problem is that the contents, the resumes are no good. A lot of it is the only source of intel for most of the AI-based candidate search and selection tools, LinkedIn. And LinkedIn's not horrible. It's sort of structured data, but still not great. Most people don't take the time or don't have the knowledge necessary to do it. We're going to try and solve that today. So there's some pattern matching, and you get down selected, and you don't have a match. You do have a match. The job description has to correspond to the candidates, and most job descriptions are getting better. I've noticed of late. Somehow people are upping their game, and I think it's because maybe the tide has turned and employers are getting more serious about actually filling jobs than they had been. And I think there's this realization that HR needs to step up and help. HR people on the ropes, by the way, they're struggling, and they have my sympathy. So if you work in human resources in any capacity, yeah, I know it's hard. The first people to get laid off when the economy takes a dive is the recruiters, and it's brutal, right? So anyway, you have the job description that was written aspirationally, not operationally. What I mean by that is it doesn't necessarily correspond to the work. That's why I designed and build. That's why our first Aramis client was and still is. We actually have two on it. Workforce assessment, where we look at what the work is that's actually done and create job descriptions based on that, and that are about filling gaps, not just like getting more people who are exactly the same. The employer winds up waiting because it takes so long to sift through so many dodgy applications. Now, I found a solution for that, which is put in knockout filters. Usually it's geographic. So like most of the jobs that we recruit for are remote in one of the countries that we remote in Mexico, remote in the Philippines, but I'll get resumes from like Nepal. And I just I just auto reject them. If you're in Nepal and I auto reject it to you, like the question is, why did you apply? It says in, must be in, right? So that's actually a relatively solvable problem, but it is still hard to find really good talent because the best talent is not looking. So in terms of what you can actually do in a resume, oh, and actually at this point, let me ask you if anybody wants, oh yeah, block. Well, the argument could be made that it's because of Jack Dorsey being a crappy manager. We should probably do a session sometime on the reality of like what you can do with AI and what you don't, and how people use it and don't. I will probably put that together with a presentation on how I built Aramis and what AI is actually good for and not good for right now. Now, 6 months from now, this stuff's going to seem quaint. So there's like a really short shelf life on any of this. But there's always a story behind layoffs or announcements about layoffs that is not the same in reality. We'll talk about that some other time. I think it's an important topic. I will say that I know one company that they had a couple 100,000 employees, and once they had a really bad quarter, they announced that they were going to lay off 15,000 people. They didn't actually lay off 15,000 people. They canceled 15,000 open recs. And then they had a good quarter, next quarter, and they reopened them. So like, don't believe the news. Okay, so what we can see in an actual resume is if it says led incident response, okay, we can check the job title and see if it matches. If they say, you know, I manage 10,000 endpoints, you can like look into LinkedIn. And if the company has 15,000 employees, then 10,000 endpoints is plausible. I implemented a SIM. If you know somebody who is involved, you can find out if they actually have that SIM. And what the person's level of involvement was. One thing I see a lot that it drives me crazy is things like reduced MTTR by 40%. If, for one thing, like that number is way too round, like that's probably not real. And if you're an individual contributor, you're not going to reduce MTTR as an individual. That's manager stuff. If I'm hiring managers, I want to see numbers like that. But there is this standard line being given to people that hiring managers want to see numbers, like don't do the percentages. And I'm going to show you a demo with a prompt that shows you how to avoid that. Another is like manage a team of such and such. It's pretty easy to find out from LinkedIn, like the organization. You can kind of map it. All right, a couple of others. If you're looking for senior people, it's really hard. If you are a senior person looking for a job, it's really hard. But it's bad on both sides. Much of that comes down to the fact that it's expensive to do executive recruiting. I don't do executive recruiting mainly because I don't travel. It takes me, I can be in Dallas in 2.5 hours from Oaxaca, but the bounce through from there is more time. And like if I go to Mexico City, I'm blowing 3 days on travel and stuff like that. Whereas, here, the commute to my office is, well, I live here. And so that kind of stuff, executive recruiting is a different game. There are companies that are really good at it. Like I really like Hampton North. So like mad love for Hampton North. They do a great job with that. There are companies like Hydrick and Struggles and, the big names. I work in mostly technical and middle management. It's really hard to find people like CISOs that are good. It's really hard to find deputy CISOs that are good. There are a lot of people around who are actually not good, right? In terms of like how long it takes, that 3% number is probably conservative. It takes a long time to get people through the process. And that's one of the things we're trying to work out. So everybody is at fault. I don't want to get into that anymore because I want to get to demo, which is fun. Who profits from this? Like who actually benefits? Because clearly, like if you're a professional and you're looking for work, it's not working for you. If you are a hiring manager, it's not working for you. And if you're a recruiter in the middle, the system is really not working. So somebody's got to benefit for it to persist. And one is, like I said, is LinkedIn, good old Monster Board, which was the very first job board back in 1996. They benefit from the dysfunction. The longer you're on the market, the longer a job goes unfilled, the more you struggle as a recruiter, the more you pay and the longer. A lot of the certification bodies benefit from the madness. I'm often asked, like, what cert should I get to get a job? And my answer is usually like, unless you're looking for federal or state, where there's a hard requirement for certification, make sure you have the basics covered. Like I said, I like the CISSP, I like Security Plus. They will not get you a job. They just will see to it that you're They're not filtered out, not down selected to the sort of third level or more. Some staffing agencies benefit from this sort of thing because at some point you get desperate. I've seen this happen where somebody like, I've gone through 31 sim interviews and sim engineer interviews, and this is a real case, actually, 31. And my TA team has spent 6 months trying to find somebody. Can you just get me a contractor? And it winds up, I got to mark them up. Cost money, cost significant money. All right. Not to say that all staffing agencies are bad. We can do some staffing, right? It's just an alternative way of different budget that you can draw from sometimes. And it's good. Resume services, I would like to, there's some good ones. The example I'm going to show you is with my resume, because it's mine, I can share it. And I paid $3,500 to have my resume rewritten and my LinkedIn rewritten, and for about 8 weeks of career counseling, about 2 to 3 hours per week. But that's because I have an extremely complex work history, and I've done so much over my, throughout my career. I needed somebody to help. I think the consultant that did that, she was raised her rate to $3,800. If you want an intro, she's awesome, but there's a good chance that by the time you've seen what we do, and I've done the demo, you won't need it. Most people don't have as complex a background. I have referred other people to her who had really great results and felt that the money was well worth it. But for the most part, particularly the ones that say, $200 resume, $300 resume, $500 resume, they're just going to do kind of what I do, but not as well. What you can do yourself. Aramis would not have been possible were it not for the NIST NICE framework. So I'm going to use that in the demo. Now, NIST NICE is a taxonomy and framework. It describes jobs according to 41 work roles. The elements of that are what they call TKS statements, or not task knowledge and skills, and they're grouped in 11 competency areas. The reports that Aramis produces are generated according to that. What's missing is what is the job actually? And remember, originally the idea was to automate my stuff as a recruiter so I could go faster and deliver high quality despite the acceleration, and succeeded at that. But I would have to map the TKS statements and the competency areas and the work roles to the actual jobs that people are looking for or trying to fill. So we have 15 of them. That mapping took a hellacious amount of work. I wouldn't recommend it. By the way, the reason I don't mind giving this stuff away is no one wants to do the kind of work I do. It was crazy. So what does success look like, really? Oh, and that's the commercial. I'll show that to you later too. One of the things that we get to produce with the second phase of Aramis Insight is a thing called Challenge, which is objective assessment across 300 TKS statements. So we map every relevant TKS statement, relevant in terms of a job, to one or more scenario-based multiple choice questions. They're very much like the CISSP. Like I said, I really like the CISSP. I love how the questions are written. I like them for the reason that a lot of people hate them, which is there's ambiguity. And in the real world, you have to read and understand quickly and tease out what's the worst, what's the best bad option. And that's what that's about. We then take those results and then produce a learning development roadmap according to the gaps. Now, when we do this with Aramis, there are 3 parts. I'm going to frame this up, and I want to show this to you what I'm actually giving you for free. So actually, I don't want to register or log in. You can either use a Google account or you can do a magic link thing, which means I don't have to manage passwords. I'm going to add Microsoft soon. Okay, so this is the dashboard, and I have a bunch of sample stuff here. So the example I'm going to use in this case is the cybersecurity manager role. If you're looking for something above that, like CISO, deputy CISO, just use the cybersecurity manager role. It's a close enough fit. CISO is so business focused that I can't really assess against your business, but I can assess against and this is very CISSP like. The difference is you don't study for it. It doesn't expire, and there are no dues. So you get a report. You can send the report out. You can, send us scores if you want. I actually recommend that. But one of the things that you can get is learning development roadmap, which I'll show in a sec. But it starts with the CERT, which is a self-assessment where you basically evaluate your own skills. $3, right? It's really just so I can get you put down a credit card and like prove you're not a bot. The second part is challenge, where that's the 300 question assessment. It takes about 4 hours. I tried to skinny it up. I just couldn't do it. I can suss out somebody's capabilities pretty well in about an hour. I record the interview, I take the transcript and swizzle all together and then create a profile for the client. That's what we do here and reconcile. So it's cert, 15 minutes and $3. Challenge, month of March is $100 or 99, I think. I took it down by half price because we're just past launch. And then reconcile, I think we're selling for, it's like 149 or 199. I don't remember. Again, I discounted by about a half since we're sort of the launch phase. And I want to get people to use it. I'm going to show you this part, which gets you a draft learning development roadmap and a draft CV. In Reconcile, we take the transcript of the interview, which is a conversation with me or somebody like me, and further enhance those deliverables. So that's what that looks like. Now, I've pulled mine out here for the sake of expediency. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, and actually I pre-staged this because I didn't know how long the models were going to take. So we take the assert report, which looks like this. Oh, I had a broken logo. That's slick. Right, produces this roadmap or radar map showing how you evaluate yourself in terms of the job. So the red is the self-evaluation or your own standing in terms of the 41 competency areas, and then here's how we define the job. So for security manager, you need to be big on compliance, security awareness, mid-level on this other stuff, not as good on vulnerability management, tech, not as strong on network, but sort of midpoint. No matter how you look at it, security managers have to know a lot. And in this case, and this was, I think actually I did this when I just sort of like clicked randomly, this is the score I got. And then we show like how do you stack up here, and then getting down here, like over and under. So this is the under. This is stuff that I would want to work on so bad it actually bled over. And here's the over. If I were preparing myself to apply for such jobs, I would want to focus exclusively on these. And on these, I'm going to skate, right? One of the problems that the typical certification program has is it has you study all of this, whether you know it or not. So more breakdowns, blah, blah, blah. That's the thing you get for $3. I'm not going to show you how to do that. I can't because you have to, it's complicated. So spend money. And then comes a challenge report. Actually, that's a learning development roadmap. There we go. All right. This is the report that comes from challenge. This takes $100 and about 2 to 4 hours of your life. Do it over 4 days. Don't do it in one setting. Actually broke it up in 4. The score here is 13% because this is like me just sort of randomly clicking through stuff against a security analyst role. But this is what it would look like if you were an intensely bad test taker. Anyway, I will post these because I don't want to spend your time on them on this. What I'm going to be working with in this case is a cert, which frames your self-assessment. The NIST NICE Framework itself, which you can get here for free. Now, make sure that you're using the 2.1.0 as of March 12, 2026, right? That's today's date. It's going to change. If you don't specify that, the model will probably go back to version 2, which has 11 categories that are not in the current framework, and they have to do with like DoD, which unless you're DoD, intelligence community, one of those, like they're still dealt with elsewhere. I don't government ever, but if you are in private sector exclusively, 2.1.0 is your bunny, and you can get it there. There's the spreadsheet, right? Ignore the JSON. It's weird. I'll just take the XLS file. You will want to export your LinkedIn profile. And if you don't know how to do that, yeah, it's pretty easy. And it produces like a kind of generic, somewhat ugly version of a CV. Don't submit that one to anybody, please. This is what my resume looks like. I'm on Linux, by the way, in case you're wondering why stuff looks weird. I'm using only Office because it's free. But this is the one that I paid like real money for 4 years ago before I decided to just go out on my own. So that's what I'm pulling in. Like, here's my prompt, and I will post this in the notes. Now, you don't have to do line breaks. I just did that for readability. But the way the prompt works is you're an expert, so invocation of the expert. The reason we do that still is you have to kind of tell the model where to look in the model. Because in the same way that the human brain has like dendrite branching, it is a network, memories are located in different places and they are like in those places. And so if you say like what kind of information you're looking for, what kind of expertise you want, it's more likely to find it and faster. So this kind of went away for a minute and I came back. So do the invocation. You are an expert resume writer with deep expertise in cybersecurity recruiting. Next part, intent. Like, what do you need? I need a resume. My current resume and use my current resume and export from my LinkedIn profile. So the PDF and the resume I'm going to fill out. Create a breakdown of my capabilities according to the NIST NICE 2.1.0 framework and put it in the appendix at the end. I upload the CSV or the XLS file every time. If you try and build this, by the way, like, be really careful with question creation, because what I found that when I was developing the question bank the first time, we have about 6,000 of them because I don't repeat them. Like for every job, each CKS, there is one question. It's not like one question, multiple jobs. I want it to be like specific to the job. At one point, I blew a few $100 because even though I was using haiku was like the script was using haiku with the entire XXX file. And it was like looking up, like it gets weird. So be careful. In this case, it doesn't matter because you're only going to do one problem. Create a breakdown of my capabilities, blah, blah, blah. Inputs to that are my CSV, LinkedIn profile, Aramis challenge report, and NIST NICE XLS file. Unless you did challenge, you're not going to have the report. It's not a big deal. It helps because it has the objective assessment and all the detail. And you can then say like, I actually tested against this stuff and here are the details. But you don't absolutely need that. And in fact, the version I'm using is like kind of a mess. Don't invent anything. Stick to what's in the documents. This is crucial. Sometimes it's hallucinations. Sometimes what the model is doing is taking bad advice because there is more bad resume advice than good resume advice. So tell it to stick with what's in the documents. Do not invent percentages or accomplishments that are not in the files. Avoid AI writing cliches. This is pretty powerful. If you edit it all, and a lot of people don't, but actually an AI generated resume I find to be pretty easy to edit because I feel like even though it's my writing, it's not my writing. Like everything I write starts out as me drafting and outlining and drafting some more, and then I drop it into Claude and I let Claude rework it. And even if it's still my writing, like I don't feel as weird about editing it anymore. I then give it feedback and I'll say like, don't say quick one. Don't say, like there are various cliches. The other thing that I do is I tell it what style I like, which is Lexington and Badgett from The Economist, but with US spelling, right? And that's just what I like to read. So you can do the same kind of thing too. Usually it's a matter of saying, don't say this, don't say that. Keep the formatting simple so I can easily paste the content into Word, LinkedIn, and text-only application fields. We're almost 10 minutes. Cool. Like I said, it's March the 12th, 2026 at 10:50 a.m. my time. These days you have to say what the time is because for all I know, there's another gigantic model that was released. But what I did in this case, just to sort of make the point, is I didn't use ChatGPT 5.3. By the way, I like Claude a lot. I like it for writing. I'm hearing that ChatGPT 5.4 is better for code, but it's spendy and I kind of don't need it. And in this particular case, like when I started doing this, I used ChatGPT 4.0 Omni and it worked great. So a cheap model will do as good a job as an expensive one. And I think that's really important, especially if you're looking for work. I mean, the reason we priced Aramis at prices so low compared to like certifications and resume raising services and all that stuff is because if you're looking for work, you probably are either out of cash or close to it, or you better be washing your cache. And so I want to make sure you know that like you don't need the most expensive frontier model. You can even do this with like the Kimi K2 is pretty great, and look, you can do it at $20 a month license. Most of them only allow you to upload one file on the free tier. Ask that. Don't take my word for it. If you can do it for free, great. Like, but you're probably gonna have to pay $20. I wouldn't bother with the local models. They're just not as good at writing, right? But you can try. Make a project, present it, invite me. Anyway, so I did this example with ChatGPT 5.2 thinking. It took a while. It took like 5 minutes. So here you see I dropped my profile in. This is ChatGPT 5.2 thinking rendering the spreadsheet so I can see it. So it actually takes a whole workbook, which is pretty neat. There's my prompt, which I typically actually drop into the LLM and then I paste it to. Sometimes it matters, sometimes it doesn't. A lot of the time it helps to prompt the model with the same thing twice. Like prompt it, give it the files, prompt it again, because it's kind of like last in, first in, first out, last in, first out, one of those. So this is what it produced. Like it gave me a clean, copy pastable thing. It's Markdown. If I copy and paste this out, it's perhaps going to look like Markdown, perhaps not. Kind of depends on where you paste it. But it followed pretty standard decision making, right? So the most recent stuff, which is current, and the summary is long, right? Recent, long, less recent, shorter. Some of these I would probably take out, like security tinker is not a job. It was like a friend of mine started it. He was like, you should be in the tinker. I'm like, okay. So I put on my LinkedIn. Right. The Mexico business expert contributor, they call me that. Not much to say there. But good, right? I mean, if I receive this resume from you as a candidate, I'd be like, all right, they're good. They're good at AI, and it doesn't sound like AI, right? It got this stuff from my LinkedIn mostly. LinkedIn is really good for organizing skills. Use it for that. Keep it up to date. Take the stuff out that like don't list protocols for God's sake. Like no one cares if you say, pretty much everybody I've seen, every case where I ask like how DHCP works, and the person I interviewed doesn't even know what it is. So like, don't say it. Now here's the part where we get the mapping. So Appendix A, NIST NICE capabilities breakdown, evidence-based, because this is one where I used, it says evidence-based because I use challenge. Again, this will work fine with a cert. You just won't have that part. I don't like the bullets, so I would probably strip that out. Interesting. All right, cool. So that's ChatGPT 5.2 thinking. This is ChatGPT 5.4. This was fast. Even though it's the thinking version, it was fast. So same thing, here are the files, Excel file, this is my prompt, this is what it did, this is what it drew from. And here's one version of Markdown, another version of plain text. Keep both. Keep the formatting simple. Nobody needs to see your picture on your resume. I know there's some parts of the world, particularly like APAC, where it's considered, it's expected to have a picture on your CV. I typically recruit for US companies that really don't want to see that. Have two versions. Like if I have to have a picture version, cool. The main one of the reasons to not do it is it screws up imports. So ATSs are although they're not really that good for selecting candidates out, they're necessary. And if your CV doesn't import cleanly, somebody has to do data entry. The idea of an ATS compliant resume is silly. What you want is something that is plain text and imports without somebody having to fix it. And this is that. Like the first thing is clearly a name with a couple of locations. I live in 2 places, followed by email, LinkedIn, where I am, residency status, and then the jobs. Right. That will parse nicely into into an ATS. One of the reasons I don't ask for a lot of information on our job applications is like my ATS imports it. Here's Gemini. I am on Google Workspace because I got tired of paying Microsoft, and it was too complicated. Like I didn't need all this stuff, and I wanted to get off of Zoom and just get faster. There's also a lot of automation that works well with Google that doesn't work well with Microsoft. And I really don't want to go down the Copilot road. And it turns out it was the right decision, because one of the things you get with that is a certain amount of Gemini. So I did this with Gemini Pro. It was pretty fast. I don't generally use Gemini. I find that it produces a lot of stuff I don't need. But if that's what you got, it's what you got. And this actually is, this is decent, right? It wrote a summary, notable accomplishments. Okay, interesting, right? How did it do on the mapping? This nice framework capability breakdown. And it grouped it by the 5 work group role categories. So there are 41 of those, and they're grouped into 5. And so group it that way. That's kind of cool. Now, an employer is not necessarily going to know this. They're not going to know what that means. So you might say, like, take that out. But it's decent. ChatGPT, on the question of, and actually, that's kind of it for the demo. By the way, this is literally what I've been doing for a couple of years. People are like, how many people have you gotten jobs with Aramis? I haven't gotten anybody a job with Aramis yet. We launched 2 weeks ago. It's too early. But what we have done is done this stuff by hand for a long time. And we tried a lot of other things before we got to the point where we had something that was really effective. In terms of like compromises around, what we can't do, the only compromise is I have to charge for it, right? And it looks like this. So the NIST, the assert self-assessment, again, $3. We're doing roughly half off for challenge, which gets you the objective assessment. And then the third part, which is where we actually like verify, like you can totally cheat on challenge. We could completely cheat, but we're not going to verify it until we talk to you for 30, 45 minutes, maybe an hour, which is it's part coaching. It's part like, why are your scores wonky between your self-evaluation and the objective assessment? Tell me more about. And if you cheated, we're going to find out. We won't certify your stuff. We don't have any anti-fraud built in until that point. But, we took that down by half. You can do their bundles. So if you want to like commit to a certain challenge, $95. If you want to go in head first, you can buy the whole kit and caboodle for $249 down from $602. If you want to do bulk, like if you got a team, there are also discounts on that. Hit me up. The voucher code doesn't work. It's really complicated. So, actually, in the first case I talked about with the human capital assessment, I basically just shipped them an invoice and a discount code for a bunch of people. Yeah, as for models, I don't use Grok a lot because I find the results are weird, and the high-end models are really spendy. And I find I get what I need out of Claude. Whatever is best at any given time depends on a lot of factors. Sometimes, ultimately, it's coming down to like tokens, dollars per token, or tokens per dollar. And I find that Claude, the way I use it in the browser mostly. I either use it in the browser or I have Claude write a script that uses the API. I don't use Claude Code. I do a lot of copying and like drag and drop images into the web interface or things like troubleshooting. So like if you send me feedback, fun behind the scene thing, if you send me feedback in a chat message, I screenshot that message and I drop it into the Claude Opus console and I just hit enter and it knows what to do with it. It'll be like, oh, this feedback from Kurt about such and such. Do you want me to do something about it? Do you want me to add it to linear, which is what we use for bug tracking, task tracking? Or if somebody sends me an error, I can take that error image, drop it into Claude and say, just like, go. I can't do that with Claude Code. I know that I could drop it into a directory and say, look in this directory or whatever. That's not my workflow. Whatever your workflow is, if it's effective for you, it's effective for you. Great. Use it. I would recommend trying stuff. I expect that at some point I probably will land on Claude Code or Cursor. But as for models, cool. I think ChatGPT's fine. Most of what I do is writing. Like everything that I write is processed at some level through Claude or ChatGPT. Right now, I'm trying to preserve my my ChatGPT utilization because I run out every week. I'm on Max Pro, which is supposed to be infinite. It's not. I ran out on Tuesday, and I don't get more until tonight at midnight. So I have to be judicious. So I kind of mix it up depending on what I need. Gemini 2.5 I find is actually better than the 3 series, which is sad. And don't discount the Chinese models. Like Kimi K2 is really great. Qwen is terrific. Image generation, supposedly the best stuff comes out of Nano Banana. I do my graphics with Claude. So the graphics that you see from me are usually Claude, and it's better with my logos. So, because remember, I post stuff as Nears for Cyber sometimes as Project Aramis other times, and sometimes both. So the logos have to not look bad. And Kimi K2 is a little too creative for my purposes. I think. Oh, Microsoft Copilot. I never touch it. I just don't need it, and I hear it's expensive. Oh, it's expensive. Yeah, I mean, so the Microsoft certifications are interesting because they're not really generic. So SE200 gets mentioned. Really good if you're in an all Microsoft shop. I recommend that one. Microsoft Sentinel Logic Apps. Yeah, I actually have the AZ. I think I've got the Microsoft and AWS ones a few years ago. They're hard, and you actually do need to use the product to get through them. Again, they won't get you the job, but they'll get you down selected. They might get you down selected. You can get an interview. Let me leave you with this. A couple of things. Announcements. I'm shutting Circle down. It costs me $259 a month, and people aren't using enough. And it's kind of like having a great restaurant in a neighborhood that gets no traffic. I'm just going to be using LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook. We are on Facebook. We are on TikTok. I really like TikTok. There's a lot of like hungry people who need help. If you want to help people, try TikTok. There's a lot of bad advice. There's some good advice. People need help there, and they're really eager. And I'll be posting all the content that I've been putting on Circle on the Project Aramis and Yours for Cyber websites. There'll be not a paywall. Well, not paywall that stuff, but it's lead gen because I go to sell stuff, and so you'll have to sign up and give me contact information. It'll need to be valid. So with that, next week I'm going to be doing a webinar, another LinkedIn Live. I'm going to do this every Thursday at the same time. It's good cadence. I forgot what the topic is. To tell you the truth, go look it up. Hopefully, you'll give Aramis a try. If you need any help, hit me up on LinkedIn or on Discord. Aramis questions. Love you guys. Thanks for showing up, the live people. And if you're watching the replay, you're awesome too. I appreciate your attention. Take care.